The night shift. Taking the job at the old factory seemed like a good idea at the time. As a security guard, I was used to quiet nights and empty buildings. The factory had been shut down for years, its once bustling halls now silent. They said it was haunted, but I didn't believe in ghosts. At least not until that first night on the job. The factory was a hulking structure, its skeletal remains a reminder of a more prosperous time. Rusted machinery sat idle, covered in dust and cobwebs. My task was simple: patrol the grounds, ensure no one broke in, and report anything unusual. The first few hours were uneventful, the silence only broken by the occasional creak of the building settling and the distant hoot of an owl. It was around midnight when things started to get strange. I was making my rounds in the west wing when I heard it, a faint whisper, almost like a sigh carried on the wind. I stopped, listening intently, but the sound was gone. Shaking my head, I continued on, chalking it up to my imagination. As the night wore on, the whispers became more frequent, and I began to feel a presence, like someone was watching me. The air grew colder, and an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my duties, but it was impossible to shake the sense of dread. Around 3 a.m., I decided to take a break in the small office near the factory's entrance. As I sat down, a gust of wind blew through the room, even though the windows were closed. The papers on the desk fluttered, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. A photograph of the factory workers, their faces solemn and weary. I picked it up, studying the faces, and a chill ran down my spine. I could have sworn I saw one of the faces in the factory earlier that night. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I began investigating the factory's history. I found old records and newspaper clippings in a dusty file cabinet. The factory had been the site of a tragic accident years ago, a boiler explosion that killed several workers. The company had covered it up, blaming the workers for negligence. The factory was shut down soon after, and it was said that the spirits of the deceased workers never found peace. The spirits seemed to be trying to communicate, leading me to a locked door in the basement. With trembling hands, I managed to pick the lock and open the door. Inside, I found a hidden room filled with old documents and blueprints. Among the papers was a letter from one of the workers detailing the unsafe conditions and the company's refusal to address them. It was clear that the accident had been preventable, a result of the company's greed and negligence. The spirits wanted the truth to be known. They had been wronged in life, and now, in death, they sought justice. I gathered the documents and contacted a local journalist, who agreed to investigate further. The story made headlines, and the factory's dark history was finally brought to light. As the truth came out, the hauntings ceased. The spirits of the workers found peace, their unfinished business resolved. The factory, once a place of sorrow and pain, became a memorial to those who had lost their lives. I left the job soon after, unable to shake the memories of that night. The experience had changed me, made me believe in things I once thought impossible. I still think about those workers and the lives they could have lived, and I wonder if somewhere out there, other spirits are waiting for someone to uncover their stories and set them free. But then, one night, years later, I received a call. It was the journalist I had contacted back then. She sounded frantic and scared. She said she had found something more, something even darker about the factory's history. She mentioned a hidden tunnel beneath the basement, a place where even more secrets lay buried. Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet her at the factory. The old building looked even more decrepit than I remembered. The journalist was already there, waiting by the entrance, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. She led me to the basement, to the same locked door I had opened years ago. This time she pushed aside a heavy cabinet to reveal a trapdoor underneath. We descended into the tunnel, the air growing colder and the darkness pressing in around us. The tunnel led to a small chamber where we found old, rusted machinery and more documents, even older than the ones I had found before. These documents told of a different tragedy, one that had been erased from history. The factory had once been a front for illegal experiments on the workers, trying to create a more efficient labor force. The boiler explosion had been a cover-up for the deaths caused by these experiments. The restless spirits weren't just seeking justice, they were seeking revenge. As we stood there, reading the horrifying details, we heard a noise behind us. Turning, we saw a figure standing in the entrance of the tunnel. It was a man, dressed in old factory overalls, his eyes burning with an otherworldly light. He spoke, his voice a harsh whisper, telling us to leave and never return. We fled the factory, but the memories of that night haunted me even more than before. The spirits had found their justice, but their need for vengeance remained. I could feel their eyes on me, even in the safety of my home, and I realized that some secrets are best left buried. The next morning, the journalist was found dead in her home, her face twisted in terror. The police ruled it a natural death, but I knew the truth. The spirits had taken their revenge. I left town, hoping to escape the reach of the restless dead. But deep down, I knew that no matter where I went, the shadows of the past would always follow me.